Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Pokemon Alpha Sapphire. In the last part we collected the 8th and final gym badge here in Hoenn, thus meaning we now technically have access to the endgame. With that said, we also got access to the Eon Flute and used it, so now we have free reign over Hoenn even more than we already did. And thus, we also have access to many legendaries that I'm going to be going out of my way to get most of before we actively head on to endgame. Let me put it like this. We're in part 25. I estimated earlier in the LP that we're probably finishing the main campaign around part 30. I can confirm that number is pretty much on note. So we're going to be spending about 2 or 3 videos here in a row just focusing on legendaries. First off, through the Lati, we have access to this nameless chamber. Now notably, this Mirage spot isn't always here, but it's not random like Crescent Isle was. In specific, this area shows up if you have at least 3 Pokemon in your party that have max friendship through the traditional sense, not Pokemon Ami. Clear air surrounds the area. It's lifting your spirits. Well, people who are familiar with Sinnoh immediately recognize what's going on here. It's time for our first of a trinity of legendaries. Mysterious ring is floating in the air. Something's visible deep in the hole. Let's see who we got. Meet what is my first of the 3 Lake Guardians from Sinnoh, Mesprit, a pure psychic type with Levitate for its only ability, so it's got a weakness to Bug, Ghost, and Dark, but it's immune to Ground. Mesprit is, in general, a good mixed defender and attacker, but its HP and speed aren't the best for a legendary. But at the end of the day, with its moveset, it can do a lot of good attacking and defending in any case. It's perfectly usable, as most legendaries are. The way that most of the set location Mirage spots, like the Nameless Cavern here, work is that as long as you fulfill the circumstances for them to show up, you can enter them whenever. But also, most of them have more than one Pokemon attached to them. Which ones are there depends either on your version in some cases. Meanwhile, the rest largely will change what's available within them dependent on the 3DS's system, date, and time. In specific, here in Nameless Cavern, between 4 AM and 7:59 PM, you'll fight Mesprit here, which is the time block I was fighting this in, of course. Between 8 and 8:59, you'll find Uxie, and between 9 and 3:59 AM, you'll find Azelf. I'll talk about those times again whenever we actively come back here to take care of those other 2 legendaries, as frankly, I didn't want to wait all in one area to do it all at once, so I just come back here when it's more convenient to get the other legendaries in question. Also, currently I actively have the Vaporeon I evolved the last time in my party, mostly just so I can gain some those since I do have a purpose for it later on. Mesprit, the emotion Pokemon. It sleeps at the bottom of a lake. Its spirit is said to leave its body to fly on the lake's surface. Thank God you're in a set location because Mesprit will always haunt my nightmares as a former roaming legendary. Worth noting, whenever you actively enter a time-based area like that, it does actively keep into account the time that it was when you entered it, not the time it is if you say load in there, I believe. So you do actively need to leave and come back in the case you, like, save and quit there and then load back in. Next up, we're going to check out the other spot we have here, the Pathless Plain near Pacific Log Town. You feel a piercing gaze sizing you up. Time for our next legendary already. Again, we're going to be doing this a lot over the next several parts. In some regards, this is probably the most legendaries they give you access to all at once, but because of the time stipulations within it, it definitely takes a little bit longer to get to some other legendaries. Next up, we have our first member of the Swords of Justice, Cobalion. Gen 5 legendary, steel fighting type, so it's weak to fighting, ground, and fire, but immune to poison. Cobalion, alongside the other Swords of Justice, are a little bit notable in that they technically have fewer stats than a lot of other legendaries, with only 2 stats being over 100. Cobalion, in specific, is a very good physical defender that's also decently fast. And while it can attack decently well, its special defense is notably lacking. It's usually about the tier of a 2nd or 3rd tier evolution in that regard. So, if you want to use a legendary and not be absurdly broken on the stats, the Swords of Justice aren't the worst choice, but again, I just don't like to use them to begin with. Notably, Cobalion's main ability is Justified. I believe we've talked about that ability before in the LP, but just in case we haven't, that boosts the attack of the user 1 stage for every single time they get hit by a Dark-type move, which can be nice, but not my preferred ability type overall when it's on a Pokemon that has it semi-randomly, so a Pokemon that has it by default no matter what. Not exactly my favorite ability, but it has a good use case overall still. Some things to note. First off, the Pathless Plane here will only show up while you're riding a Lati if you have at least 3 Pokemon in your party that have their EVs maxed out. So doing super training as early as I did paid off pretty quickly in that regard. Secondly, the Pokemon that you can find here at the Pathless Plane, which are notably the 3 main Swords of Justice, which one is here depends on which day you actively visit it. If it's a Wednesday, Friday, or Sunday, you find a Cobalion, like I am here. I think I may have recorded this on a Wednesday off the top of my head, because I usually can't record on Fridays, at least at the moment. If you're on Tuesday or Saturday, you'll find a Terrakion, and if it's Monday or Thursday, you'll find a Virizion. But also worth noting, if you're trying to actively manipulate the clock so that one of these legendaries shows up faster, you kind of need to plan ahead with that, in that when you change the system clock, the game will detect it, and no Pokemon will appear in areas like this for the next 24 hours. Meanwhile, in the case you're trying to catch these Pokemon and you mess up, either they faint due to struggling or you knock them out yourself and you didn't save beforehand so you can't reload the save, you do need to wait until you've actively beaten the game for them to respawn. But they do at least respawn, so in the case you accidentally knock something out and it's too late, you're not out of luck, thankfully. Mind you, that's kind of been standard practice in this series for a good while now with how they handle legendaries. So far, the legendaries are being pretty kind. Notably, I do, I believe, cut out throws past like the 3rd or 4th ball if it takes too long, as I don't want to just have the speed up be a 4th of a video while I'm trying to catch legendaries like this, especially when soft resets are involved in some cases. Cobalion does remind me of a very recent story when I was playing through the Sword and Shield DLC on stream, but I'll talk about that in a few moments. Cobalion, the Iron Will Pokemon. It has a body and heart of steel. It worked with its allies to punish people when they hurt Pokemon. Neat, into the box you go. Next up, we're back in Pacific for 2 reasons. This is actively why I did Cobalion right before we came over here. First off, we can grab this Megastone here. This is the Kangaskhanite. Now, if you remember, this wasn't here earlier. When you actively defeat or catch Groudon or Kyogre, gaining access to Wallace in the 8th Gym and the Eon Flute and the expanded National Pokedex DexNat Pokemon isn't the only thing that happens. Now notably, in many areas we've already been to in the LP, there are new Megastones waiting for you there, like the Kangaskhanite, which of course allows you to evolve Kangaskhan, which I genuinely don't remember if we run into, so I'll actively load up the stats to talk about Kangaskhan and Mega Kangaskhan in a moment. My main goal for right now, though, is to head west of Pacific on Route 132 through 134, the final main routes in the region, because not only are there a lot of items and trainers over here, but it's also time for me to turn in on a side quest I technically started immediately after leaving Lily Cove, effectively. More actually after finishing the gym over Moss Deep. As back then, I caught a Wailmer and a Relicanth. Both of them are in my team right now, but if you're following along, worth noting, if you caught a Wailmer more recently than not, you do need to make sure you level it up along the way because we need it to be a Wailord by the time we reach our destination. Next up, time for our next new Pokemon. This is Machamp. Pure fighting type that evolves from Machoke when it's traded or exposed to a Linking Cord in certain generations. Pure fighting type, so it's weak to Flying, Psychic, and Fairy. While Machamp can't take a hit the best overall, and it's not too fast, it is an incredible physical attacker that is well worth its weight with that. The only real weakness it has is that it really can't use special attacks that well, which is pretty standard for most fighting types even all these years later, so that's not too surprising. If you have a buddy nearby that you can trade with, evolving a Machoke into a Machamp is a very worthwhile choice. Just that in this generation, I already have a fighting type, and I can't trade to begin with in this game right now, so not one I can really use overall. Now, I'm actively surfing from this little precipice right here because the water currents that are here, and this is the main reason you'd find them otherwise outside of the undersea cavern, by the way, we get the TM for Sludge Wave. That is a decently powerful special-based poison-type move that has a low chance of poisoning the target. If memory serves, it does target all Pokemon and doubles outside of the user, so it can be a little haphazard in that regard, but if you're using like a Steel type alongside Pokemon with that, you don't have much to worry about. So immediately after getting Sludge Wave's TM, I did ride the Lati back to Pacific because due to the nature of the currents here on routes 132 through 134, you cannot get everything done here on one trip. You frequently need to leave and then come back. You can either fly to the route itself using the Lati or just Pacific. I am largely jump cutting to the same place though, which is namely that one little still water section on the northern part of 132 near that one swimmer Pokemon trainer, as that's the most consistent place to get to a lot of the northern half of 132 through 134. If you're trying to access the southern regions, though, there are other ways to do that more consistently. For the moment, let's talk about Kangaskhan. We got the Megastone for that a few moments ago, but if memory serves, while there might be a random trainer, especially in the post-game area, that can have Kangaskhan's, you're not seeing many of them across Hoenn itself, because if memory serves, they are an X and Y exclusive Pokemon when it came to Gen 6 overall. With that said, Kangaskhan itself, as I believe I've talked about in prior Pokemon LPs, pure normal type, so it's weak to fighting, immune to Ghost. Kangaskhan itself has a decently high HP stat and attack stat, and it's decently fast as well. Its biggest weakness overall, if memory serves, is its special attack, which you really shouldn't be using anyway. But if you Mega Evolve it, it actively gains about a good 30 physical attack, 20 physical defense, 20 special attack, 20 special defense, and 10 speed. But out of all of the Mega Evolutions, it arguably got the strongest ability upgrade in its Mega Evolution. It has the unique ability Parental Bond, where the baby that is in Kangaskhan's Satch hops out and fights alongside it. In doing this, most of the moves that the Mega Kangaskhan will use from there on, with a notable list of exceptions, actively become two-strike moves even if they weren't multi-strike to begin with. So things like Mach Punch or Thunder Punch will now hit twice. It's absurd, especially because each one can separately critically hit. It's amazing. Speaking of amazing, though, this is one of my favorite Pokemon. That was Heracross, a Gen 2 bug fighting type, meaning it is weak to Flying, Fire, Psychic, and Fairy. Notably, Flying is a 4x weakness. Ability-wise, Heracross can have Swarm, Guts, or Moxie, which is just generally a good match for its incredibly high physical attack stat and good moveset to back that up. Its biggest weakness is that it has a low special attack stat, but you're not using it for that in most cases anyway. It can take a hit decently well as well. But notably, back on Route 127, we already have the Mega Stone for this, so we can already use Mega Heracross. And Mega Evolving, for one thing, its ability instead becomes Skill Link, where if an attack can hit multiple times like Double Slap or Bullet Seed, Skill Link makes it so that move will always hit the max amount of times. I believe the way it works behind the scenes is that it technically makes it only have one accuracy check, so if it hits, it will hit with every hit, which is really good as it is, but when you partner that with Mega Heracross's boosted stats of an additional 60 physical attack, 40 physical defense, and 10 special defense at the admitted cost of 10 speed, Mega Heracross can really wreck some days if you put some good multi-hits on it. I adore Heracross, and I adore Mega Heracross all the more. Again, Mega Evolutions, generally, really useful. I just wish they were usable by more Pokemon than just some fan favorites in a lot of cases. This trainer's a little bit interesting in that they actively have 2 new Pokemon for us. Starting off, they're going to throw out Shelgon. This evolves from Bagon, the Pokemon we saw all the way back near where we first met Aaron, at level 30. Pure Dragon type, so it's weak to Ice, Dragon, and Fairy. Shelgon is a great physical defender with some good physical attack to back it up, but its special defense and speed's definitely a little bit low. But that's because it's a middle evolution on its way to absurd greatness. Ability-wise, it can either have Rock Head or Overcut, so either it's not taking recoil damage or it's not taking weather-related damage. For my money, Rock Head's the more consistent ability there, as that means it can use a lot of very strong attacks more reliably than other Pokemon because it can ignore half of the effect of the move. But mileage may vary on that for your own tastes. And next up we have the Menace of Blackthorn City, Kingdra. This evolves from Seadra when traded while it's holding a Dragon Scale. Water Dragon type, so it's weak to Dragon and Fairy exclusively. This Pokemon not having the ice weakness that a lot of dragons do made it arguably one of the best dragons prior to the introduction of Fairy, and it was a much needed nerf in that regard. Stat-wise, it's nothing spectacular initially. It's mostly a lot of 95s, so that means it can do a lot of things pretty reliably. When you partner that with its abilities, either being Swift Swim, Sniper, or Damp, especially Sniper, that Pokemon, if it can do some damage, will do a lot of damage. It was a terror for years. Hell, it's technically even a terror in Emerald, because you can run into one in the 8th gym leader over there that's not exactly Wallace for reasons. Upon reaching the end of the 132 through 134 route threshold, you do find yourself back at Slateport, so if you actively look at the map, we've explored, at least to some extent, all of Hoenn at this point, with the only exceptions being the deeper portions of Meteor Falls, as well as Victory Road into the Pokemon League over at Evergrande City. With that said, we also have plenty of Mirage spots to showcase, on top of some other little minor details along the way, so we still have a good chunk to showcase here. So going back at this point several minutes to talk about the story I had to mention about Cobalion. This is technically minor spoilers for the second Sword and Shield DLC, Crown Tundra specifically. So if you don't want to hear this, skip ahead about maybe a minute or so. Future me's probably putting a timestamp more specifically on screen right now. In that DLC, you can find footprints scattered across the area, and they actively shout out what the Pokemon you're looking for is, just that they use the Pokemon species type rather than the name of it. So it's like, this is the Iron Wolf Pokemon's footprints, the Glasslands Pokemon's footprints. And it genuinely took me, for some reason, until I turned a corner after finding all the footprints and just saw Cobalion there to realize, oh, right. Wow, that took me a minute. I felt so damn stupid at that point for just the silliest reason. Nice to have them again, though. Honestly, it's kind of ridiculous. Think about it, they do give you a good access to a lot of legendaries in this series pretty consistently from Gen 6 on. Because if not through the main generation that releases in a generation, whatever game they release alongside it usually allows you to access most of the remaining Pokedex or legendaries in some form nowadays. Albeit never all of it. I think technically speaking, if you wanted to nowadays, the most consistent way to get all the Pokedex done across all the generations, have a full living dex, like through Bank and all that, would be to have, technically, Red, Blue, and Yellow downloaded on your 3DS, transfer that to Pokemon Bank, have X and Y and Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, because you can get a majority of the Pokedex up to that point through those two games, like at least 500 or so of the Pokemon total. And then from there, transfer it forward and just keep going as best you can, because I think between Gen 8 and Gen 9, you can get a majority of the remaining Pokemon at that point. Not all of them, just most of them. So this specific NPC is a bit funny. They look like they'd be a Pokemon trainer, but if you talk to them, they're just like, oh, I'm going to lose to you. And they give you the TM for Psych Up because of that. Psych Up's a bit of an interesting move in that what it does is it resets its user's stat changes back to base 0 and then copies the stat stages of the target to it instead. So say you're facing a Pokemon with +6 attack and +2 defense and you're at +3 special defense and +4 special attack. You'd go back down on those other stats you already boosted for yourself, but you'd copy that +6 attack and all that from the opponent. In some cases that can be pretty good, but personally it's not my exact taste, so oh well. Has a lot of good use cases though, ultimately, just not some I really care to think about too much. So at this point, I'm actively flying back to Route 133 using the Lati so I can spawn in its route sign, because not only is this the easiest way to get this max revive, it's also the easiest way to get to the remaining trainers and our ultimate destination on this whole mess of routes. First off though, I do want to go alongside this specific little chunk of water right here, as it allows us to reach the island in the middle of Route 133 and grab an item and paste a trainer over here. Not that this trainer has any new Pokemon, or this calcium is not going to be that useful to me, but hey, I might as well do it, you know? Thankfully, this should be the only time in this LP I'm jump cutting this much across a single route, because there's just a lot to get done in this set of 3 routes at this point. Though we are going to be jump cutting pretty regularly moving forward in the LP, back to just flying on the Lati, because either I want to showcase my next destination, or just use it as a good intro point to talk about the next destination, what I want to get done there. We are coming up on our next new Pokemon, though, and it's one we've actively had the Megastone of for a while. In specific, we had the Megastone for it since we first found Slateport back in, like, what was that, Part 4, Part 5, or something like that? This specific Ace Trainer has an Alakazam. Alakazam evolves from Kadabra when it's traded or exposed to a linking cord, should that be available in that game. Pure Psychic type, so it's weak to Bug, Ghost, and Dark. You need to trade to get this thing for a reason. Alakazam is nuts. An absurd special attack stat, decently fast, and it can take a special hit decently well, especially from Gen 6 onward. Partner this with a really good moveset for its stats, on top of it either having access to Synchronized Inner Focus or especially its hidden ability, Magic Guard. Even without the Mega Evolution, this Pokemon's great. Magic Guard, by the way, I don't believe we've talked about that ability yet. That makes it so that that Pokemon can only be damaged by moves that do direct damage in some form or manner. So things like the Burn and Poison status ailments, Leech Seed, entry hazards like Spikes, I think Recoil outright and all that, just are completely prevented with Magic Guard, making it a really effective ability to have on an Alakazam. With that said, let's now talk about Mega Alakazam with all of his spoons. Mega Alakazam gains a total of 20 physical defense, a whopping 40 special attack, and 30 speed. It's even better. It's absurdly powerful. It does notably also gain the ability Trace, which copies the ability of its opponent, which can be a little bit haphazard in some cases depending on what the ability is, but it's better in more cases than it's not. So this underwater section is my ultimate destination here on Route 134, so let's take a look at what we got here. Can you read Braille? I certainly hope so, because you're going to need to a lot coming up here. This says go up here, which thankfully here in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire is pretty obvious to do because we can see the light filtering from above. With that said, I believe at least in Ruby and Sapphire, that light wasn't there, so you kind of had to actively understand Braille, which I do believe there was a dictionary for in the back of the instruction manual for the game. This room has a bunch more Braille in it. In specific, these mounds are just showcasing you usually 3 letters at a time in Braille. The top left mound is A, B, C, for instance, and then it goes all the way down to the bottom right with Z. With that said, there are some that only have single characters on them, and those are normally punctuation marks, things like the period and comma and all that. I found the Braille choice here weird even back in the day, but at least there's ways to figure this out on top of that nowadays because it's just become a widespread enough thing within the fan base because of its inclusion here. With that said, still a weird choice to use Braille for this considering it's on a flat screen and there's no way to actively read the bumps. The more important thing to read in this room is the Braille on the back wall, which reads, dig here. You need to use the move dig with any Pokemon in your party, doesn't matter what slot they're in and all that. I actively have that on the Vaporeon that I still have with me at this point in time. But also, just to wrap it up, it's time to actively use a rare candy on the Wailmer so I can get a Wailord for what we actively need coming up, because I need the Relicanth and Wailord in my party for the sealed chamber here. If you came here without both Pokemon, you're just not going to be able to finish the area until you come back to it, which sucks, but to be fair, most players are going to find out they need these Pokemon, at least on a first playthrough, probably while they're in here, unless they specifically heard about it from a friend or otherwise online, which is what happened with me. I think I first heard that you could do this from someone in like my 3rd or 4th grade classroom or something like that, because that was the era of Poke rumors especially, and I believe some of them, like I think one kid in my class tried to tell me you could steal Misty's Starmie or something in Pokemon Yellow, and I believed them at the time, but at the moment I thought about it for longer than 5 seconds, I was like, that doesn't make sense. Why did they let you do that? In here is our actual destination as well as the big Braille lore drop. Let's start with the thing we're actively here to do. In the back, there's another Braille wall. First comes Relicanth, last comes Wailord. So in order to solve the puzzle here, you need to have Relicanth in your first party slot and Wailord in your final party slot. Worth noting, that's only the case in Ruby, Sapphire, and Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Over in Emerald, you need to reverse that order. So Wailord in the first slot, Relicanth in the 6th. It sounded as if doors opened somewhere far away. So now we have access to even more areas, but for right now we want to take a look at the 6 mounds around the area that have more Braille on them. Going left to right, top to bottom, we get a bit of a lore dump. That first one was long did we live here in this cave. All thanks to the powerful Pokemon living alongside us. Yet, we sealed that Pokemon away, alone in the dark. We feared it. If you have the courage, if you still hold to hope, open the door, for beyond it, the eternal Pokemon awaits. Worth noting, on the Game Boy Advance, the wording there was a little bit different, but future me's probably already put that in the video alongside the readings we just did. Worth noting that there's been a bit of debate about what it is in that case. Technically speaking, that's more of a failure on the English language because they don't use a singular there, I believe, in Japanese. Though it does work out pretty well given what eventually happened connected to that in Gen 4 on. More on that later. Right there we got the TM for Rock Slide. That's an alright rock-based move. It's not the most powerful thing and it is a little bit inaccurate, but it has a decently high chance, I think like 30% of causing a flinch, which is decently reliable on the whole. Just not one I tend to use a lot, though it does have some extra benefits, I believe, in contests and contest spectaculars, which is a whole aspect of moves I've yet to get into that I will when I tackle contests again in post-game, so we got a little bit to go before we get there, to say the least. Worm your way over here, and you can get yourself to not only where a hidden heart scale is, but where the final item is overall on this set of routes. It's definitely a bit of a trek going back and forth in these routes to actively get all the items, but Ultimately, it's worth it for the experience and overall item gain, if only because even if you're not using them all, you can sell them for a good bit. Speaking of selling, it's a star piece, hell yeah. So for the rest of this video, we're going to focus on catching some legendaries, and starting off, we're going to go after another one from a Mirage spot, and in fact, it's one we've already been to. At this point, we've actively gone over to a new recording session in a new day, so we're going to head back to the Pathless Plain and grab the next Pokemon we can grab over there, and thankfully, we're already right next to it. It is kind of funny thinking back, though. While I've been doing Let's Plays for the better part of 14 years at this point, and streaming for about 5, I don't talk a lot on social media and all that, but I distinctly remember watching people trying to figure out what caused these Mirage spots to spawn in, as people had to piece that together pretty inconsistently, and it was kind of just a fun little puzzling journey, if memory serves. Thinking about it, actually, did I even have a Twitter by the time this game released? I think I did, because I remember having it for a graduation party not long after we graduated high school, but it's been a little bit. Next up, it's been the next day, so now there's a Virizion here for us at the Pathless Plain. Grass fighting type, so it's weak to flying, poison, fire, psychic, ice, and fairy, flying being a 4x weakness. While Cobalion was the physical defender of the Swords of Justice, Virizion is the special defender, with a notably high special defense stat, and it's also decently fast, but it's not a bad slouch at attacking either. Also has Justified for its ability, which depends really on the moveset you're going up against or what your taste is in the Pokemon in question, but it's still largely fine. Virizion's probably my least favorite of this set of Pokemon, if only because the grass typing gives it a lot more weaknesses than the other two off the top of my head. At the very least, in terms of use case. Design-wise, out of the three, it's probably my favorite. It's really between it and Cobalion. The third of the three we're going to encounter is probably my favorite to use, but my least favorite to look at. But it's not like that matters much to me at the end of the day anyway, because I really don't use legendaries, as I mentioned, unless they're otherwise forced upon me. I think this is the first one that gave me a good bit of shit when it actively came to catching it. But I think so far from memory of what I've edited, most of the legendaries haven't taken me longer than like 10 minutes to catch. Compare that to when I was a kid and I spent at least like a half hour, 40 minutes trying to catch like a specific Pokemon over in Platinum, or how Ho-Oh taunted me in the Fire Red and Soul Silver LPs. Yeah, I've come a long way. Mind you, I think just in general catching's easier in Gen 6. Virizion, the grassland Pokemon. Legend says this Pokemon confounded opponents with its swift movements. Neat! So our next destination really quickly is going to be a quick distraction. We're going to be heading back to the Weather Institute, as since it's a different day, I'm remembering to go over there and get the next of the weather rocks from the receptionist here. So in the case you want to use certain weather moves and have them last as long as they can, if not a little longer, getting these can be really good. But our next destination ultimately is Route 111 back in the desert section. Because what we did in the sealed chamber opened 3 doors across the Hoenn region at very specific rock formations that we've seen all 3 of on screen of already. And the first one I want to access is over here at the very southern point of the desert. If you remember these across the game, these open up upon doing stuff. And we have more Braille. This wall reads as right, down, down, then use your strength. So more specifically, go right 2 tiles, down 2 tiles, then use strength from any Pokemon in your party in the Pokemon menu to open the next chamber. Over in Emerald, that is notably different specifically. There it is left, down, down, then use Rock Smash. Little bit of a weird change, but it's ultimately still fine. Doing so opens the door, and we can now go see what waits beyond it. And I dread this fight every time I come to it because these guys give me some trouble for some reason consistently. Save up because it's time for a very different legendary type. Meet the almighty Regirock, a pure rock type, so it's weak to fighting, ground, steel, water, and grass. Regirock has a good physical attack and special defense stat, but its big focus is its physical defense stat, in which case it's been close to the top 5 consistently since it got introduced at a whopping 200. It is very slow and can't do a special hit too well, but that's not what it's focused on. It is here to be perhaps one of the most literal physical tanks in the series. Ability-wise, it's usually going to have clear body, so its stats can't be lowered at all, they can only be boosted. But it does notably have Sturdy as a hidden ability, which is fine. Regirock has a good enough learn set, but it is definitely the Pokemon of this legendary type I've used the least over the years, only because I've always found it aesthetically kind of boring, and something about a pure rock type has just never interested me as much as subtypings for some reason. The Reggies, though, are a bit of a personal nemesis of mine. I say Reggies, plural, because we heard 3 doors open in that cutscene. For a reason, there's more than one of these. So, the first reason is just historically, they have been little shits when it comes to catching them. One more so than the others, admittedly, but despite having the same catch rate for some reason compared to other legendaries, they just refuse to get in Ultra Balls or Dusk Balls or anything longer than a lot of other legendaries have. But that also compounds the second reason I don't like them, this battle theme. It's a fine battle theme on its own, but hearing it for upwards of 40 minutes endlessly looping with how short of a loop as it is, I have grown to greatly dislike this specific battle theme. Even though it's a really catchy background beat and all that, it's just one of those where I've heard it too long and it's really partnered with a sense of annoyingness because of them just refusing to get caught. Thankfully, compared to other playthroughs, they caught pretty quickly here, but Regirock is just the start of a really bad trend historically. It came back again in the Gen 8 DLC for reasons I'll talk about when I eventually reach that DLC in like a decade plus. Regirock, the Rock Peak Pokémon. Regirock's body is composed entirely of rocks, you don't say. Recently, a study made the startling discovery that the rocks were all unearthed from different locations. But with that, I'm gonna need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 26, we're gonna go around catching even more legendaries and seeing what else we can do to clean up some time. See you guys then.